I would never wish this on my worst enemy. To wake up and find a summons at your front door that you're being sued by your own blood brothers.
Remember 80s band The Jets? The dark and tragic secret that ruined them wasn't just one scandal or setback. It was a storm of heartbreak that haunted the family behind the music.
The mindset of thinking who does what and who's leading the group, where do you want to take the group, there just became a pool of, okay, we want to be the Jets from the 80s versus another part of the family. Like, well, who are we today?
From their manager controlling every dollar and forcing them to beg for their own money while living in a rented house, to a bitter lawsuit that caused a split among siblings who once sang in harmony.
By 1989, we were realizing we're still in a rented house. We don't own anything. We wondered, where is everything going?
And to even Elizabeth Wolfgramm, being diagnosed of cancer at just 19, a battle that nearly ended her life. The unraveling of the Jets began not on stage, but behind the scenes. At the height of their fame, when their songs ruled radio and their tours filled arenas, the siblings discovered they had almost nothing to show for it. Every dollar they earned passed through the hands of their manager, Don Powell, a man who not only guided their career, but also controlled their access to their own money.
My parents weren't seeing money coming in. They felt like Don was funneling money to other projects that he had, other artists.
Despite selling millions of records, the Wolfgramm family lived in a rented house. The siblings were forced to ask Powell for cash to cover even basic expenses, often feeling like outsiders in their own success. To the public, they were international stars with hit singles, glossy music videos, and screaming fans. To themselves, they were children of a hard-working immigrant family trapped in a system where the harder they worked, the less freedom they had. As frustration mounted, suspicions also grew. Their father, Mike Wolfgramm, became convinced that Powell was using the Jets' money to fund other acts under his company. The family had been raised on discipline, faith, and honesty, so the idea that their sacrifices were being exploited cut deep. Tension between the siblings and their manager reached a breaking point, and conversations about music increasingly turned into arguments about money.
It was a sad time when we had our fallout with Don Powell, because he was like our second father. But when money is involved, expenses have to be paid. I believe he ended up being the fall guy.
Eventually, the Wolfgramms decided to take a stand. Against the advice of MCA Records, they cut ties with Powell, believing it was the only way to reclaim control over their future.
The group is now talking about wanting to leave their management camp, and I advise against it. The group is now talking about wanting to leave their management camp, and I advise against it. My statement to them was to say, you don't want to be in any major record company and not have a manager. And they did that.
But instead of a new beginning, it became the start of a steep decline. MCA dropped the Jets almost immediately, removing the support system that had propelled them to stardom. Suddenly, the siblings found themselves stranded without management, without a label, and without access to the wealth they thought they had earned.
We had a mandate to erase $20 million worth of artists from our roster. So they got dropped.
What should have been a moment of freedom spiraled into financial collapse. With debts piling up and no steady income, the Jets were forced to file for bankruptcy. The family that had once been held up as a symbol of unity and success now faced the harsh reality of rebuilding from nothing. The fallout from Powell's grip did more than drain their finances. It planted seeds of resentment that would later grow into bitter divisions within the family. Bankruptcy was only the first blow. The real fracture would come when survival turned into a battle for control of the band itself. Bankruptcy might have ended the story for many groups, but for the Jets, it was only the beginning of deeper troubles. The financial collapse left scars, and those scars soon spread into the heart of the family itself.
On a USO tour, and got news through a newspaper that we were bankrupt.
With no label backing them and no manager to steer their career, the Wolfgramm siblings were left to navigate the uncertain music landscape on their own. The pressure to survive brought old tensions to the surface, and harmony gave way to discord. The first major fracture came over who should lead the group's comeback. Different siblings had different visions. Some wanted to stick to the pop sound that had carried them to stardom, while others argued for reinvention to keep up with changing trends in music.
There's kind of two camps. The sisters, Moana, myself, Rudy, Heine, we all had our different ways of how it should go, and they were just very different.
What might have been a simple creative disagreement grew into something far more serious. In a family of performers, leadership meant more than music. It meant identity, responsibility, and control. Resentment deepened when discussions of money reappeared. Without the structure of a label, decisions about performances, bookings, and royalties had to be made within the family. Old wounds from Powell's control resurfaced, and siblings who once stood side by side now questioned each other's motives. The group that had once prided itself on unity began to splinter. By the late 1990s, the split became official. Lawsuits were filed over the right to use the name The Jets. What had once been their bond, a shared identity as siblings making music together, turned into the very thing tearing them apart.
We had a few brothers that felt differently about the rest of us and didn't want us performing as the Jets.
Suddenly, the Wolfgramm children who had grown up harmonizing in church and entertaining crowds around the world were facing each other across courtroom tables.
Summons at your front door that you're being sued by your own blood brothers was very difficult.
The emotional weight of these battles was enormous. Moana Wolfgramm, one of the original members, later reflected on the crushing burden they had carried as children. She described how the siblings had been pushed into breadwinner roles, responsible not only for themselves, but for their entire family. What had once felt like a blessing, using music to lift their family's future, slowly became a source of resentment. The business had taken precedence over the family, and the cost was devastating. The combination of financial failure, lawsuits, and emotional strain marked one of the darkest chapters in the band's history. Yet even as the family bond fractured, another battle was quietly taking shape. One far more personal and life-threatening than any contract dispute. It would center on Elizabeth Wolfgramm, and her fight for survival would test not only her strength, but the resilience of the entire family. The lawsuits and bankruptcy had already fractured the Jets, but just as the family tried to find their footing again, tragedy struck on a deeply personal level. In 1989, Elizabeth Wolfgramm, only 19 at the time, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer.
I got the call that Elizabeth was diagnosed with full-blown breast cancer. I can't even tell you how painful that was.
Doctors gave her only months to live, a prognosis that shook the family to its core. Fame, money, and music suddenly meant nothing when one of their own was fighting for survival.
They gave me 5 months. 5 months to live, and I went through the mastectomy, and my right breast was removed.
The siblings who had once argued over finances and control now sat helpless, watching Elizabeth endure surgery and rounds of chemotherapy that left her weak but determined.
My sister was told that she had a few months to live. We were devastated, like, wow, now this can't be happening.
Her resilience became a symbol of strength within the family. She refused to let the disease define her future, clinging to her faith and her will to survive. In interviews years later, Elizabeth admitted that cancer reshaped her perspective. Life was fragile, and every moment mattered more than any chart position or royalty check.
I think that just kind of is the biggest blessing in my life, because it made me stop in my tracks and ask, why are you singing? Why do you want to sing? And it was actually the first time in my life when I met my future husband that someone ever asked me, so I think with all that happening at 22, having breast cancer, meeting my future husband, and coming to a point where we're dropped from everything, That was a turning point.
For the Jets, Elizabeth's battle highlighted the tension between public image and private pain. On stage, they still smiled and sang in harmony. Behind closed doors, they prayed for a miracle. And when she finally survived, it marked a turning point. Not just for Elizabeth, but for how the family saw themselves. Amid broken contracts and bitter lawsuits, her recovery became proof that they could endure even the darkest storms. Yet survival did not erase the scars. Elizabeth's struggle left the family even more aware of how fragile their unity was, and how quickly everything they had built could collapse. And as they tried to move forward, the haunting question remained. If their music had carried them from Tonga to the top of the charts, could their faith and resilience carry them through the chaos still to come? To truly understand how the Jets rose so high, and why their collapse hurt so much, we need to rewind. Before lawsuits, money battles, and cancer scares, there was only family, faith, and a dream. And it was in those early days that the foundations of both their music and their struggles were laid. The Wolfgramms were a proud Tongan-American family, led by parents Michaeli, Mike, and Vake. They had immigrated to the United States in search of opportunity, and with them, they carried not only their heritage, but also a determination to give their children a better life. Because of this, discipline became the heartbeat of their household, while faith formed its backbone. And woven through both was music, a gift that seemed to come naturally to each of their children. Naturally, the Wolfgramms looked toward role models who had turned family unity into global success. Groups like the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds showed them that siblings could dominate the charts together. Inspired by these examples, the Wolfgramm children learned to sing in harmony and play instruments from a young age. In fact, their first venture into performance came under the name Quasar, where they staged Polynesian revue shows that fused their island roots with modern pop rhythms. This combination was not only culturally rich but also refreshingly different, which made them stand out from countless other aspiring acts. Yet destiny often hides in detours, and for the Wolfgramms, one such detour came when they were unexpectedly stranded in Minneapolis. What could have been a setback instead became the turning point of their career, because Minneapolis in the 1980s was no ordinary city. At the time, Prince was transforming the music landscape, and the entire local scene pulsed with funk, R&B, and innovation. Immersed in this atmosphere, the Wolfgramm children absorbed influences that sharpened their sound and gave their performances a modern edge. As they rehearsed tirelessly, their natural chemistry became impossible to ignore. Every voice blended seamlessly, every dance step reflected countless hours of practice, and every show carried the unique energy of siblings united by purpose. Consequently, audiences began to see them not as a novelty act, but as a polished group with genuine star power. This growing momentum is what brought them to the attention of manager Don Powell. To him, the Wolfgramms were more than just another family band. They were a potential brand. And because Powell believed that image mattered as much as talent, he insisted on rebranding Quasar as the Jets. With this new name, combined with a carefully structured look and sound, the siblings were suddenly positioned for mainstream recognition. From there, the final piece fell into place when MCA Records signed the group. That record deal transformed them from a regional act into national contenders, and soon, international stardom was within reach. Thus, the family who had once performed Polynesian shows under the name Quasar were now poised to light up the global stage as the Jets. And with their new identity, they were ready to ignite a run of hits that would carry them to platinum records, sold-out tours, and pop culture history. With their new identity solidified and an MCA contract in hand, the Jets were finally ready to take on the world. What had started as a Polynesian revue show now stood on the edge of mainstream pop history, and almost immediately, their rebranding began to pay off. The group's debut single, Curiosity, introduced audiences to their fresh mix of pop hooks and R&B harmonies. While it gave them a foothold, it was their next track, Crush on You, that catapulted them into the spotlight. Because the song combined youthful energy with polished production, it quickly became a crossover hit, resonating with both teen pop fans and R&B listeners alike. And as their momentum grew, the Jets proved they weren't just a one-hit wonder, but a family band capable of dominating charts across genres. This success culminated in the release of their debut album, also titled The Jets, which soared to platinum status. Each track reflected the tight harmonies and vibrant stage presence the siblings had honed since childhood, and because their music appealed to such a wide audience, their fan base spread rapidly. At a time when image was everything, their wholesome family dynamic, paired with undeniable talent, gave them a unique edge in a crowded pop landscape. Yet their rise was not just about catchy singles. Behind the scenes, MCA and manager Don Powell carefully strategized how to market the band. Instead of confining them to one lane, they positioned the Jets to succeed in both R&B and pop markets. Consequently, songs like You Got It All not only topped teen radio, but also secured respect within more mature circles of music listeners. This dual appeal strengthened their reputation and widened their reach. However, even as their fame skyrocketed, the family's Mormon faith remained a grounding influence. Unlike many artists who lost themselves in the excess of the 1980s music industry, the Jets carried themselves with a sense of discipline instilled by their upbringing. This balance between global fame and family values made them stand out as not just another chart-topping act, but a cultural phenomenon. By the mid-1980s, the Wolfgramm siblings had gone from being stranded in Minneapolis to performing on stages around the world. Every song, every tour, and every television appearance reinforced their place in pop history. And as their fame continued to climb, it became clear that the Jets were no longer simply chasing a dream. They were living it at full volume. As the echoes of their debut still filled radios and arenas, the Jets refused to slow down. Instead, they doubled their efforts, determined to prove that their success was more than just beginner's luck. Naturally, the next step was their sophomore album, Magic, and with it, they reached an even higher peak. Because the album leaned into polished pop while maintaining their family-driven energy, it quickly resonated with fans. Singles like Cross My Broken Heart added another top 10 hit to their catalog, but it was Make It Real, carried by Elizabeth's heartfelt vocals, that became their defining ballad. Not only did it climb into the top 5 on the pop charts, but it also soared to number 1 on Adult Contemporary, cementing their versatility across audiences. At the same time, the infectious Rocket to You, led by Heine's vocals, earned them a coveted Grammy nomination. This recognition placed them among the industry's elite, proving that the Jets were more than just radio-friendly stars. They were serious contenders in the world of pop. Because of this, their reputation as performers expanded rapidly, and invitations to major events began pouring in. Their live performances became a cultural staple of the late 1980s. They sang the Star-Spangled Banner at both the World Series and the Stanley Cup Finals, moments that broadcast their talent to millions. Furthermore, their presence extended globally when they were chosen to perform at the 1988 Summer Olympics in Seoul. And years later, they would return to the Olympic stage at the 2002 Winter Games, a testament to their lasting impact. But the Jets' influence stretched even further through film and television. Their music appeared on blockbuster soundtracks like Beverly Hills Cop 2 and The Karate Kid Part 3, while their playful side shone through with the Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers theme song. These contributions expanded their reach beyond music charts, embedding them into pop culture itself. World tours soon followed, And because their shows blended polished choreography with raw family energy, audiences across continents embraced them. From small-town America to international arenas, the Jets carried their Polynesian roots and Minneapolis Polish everywhere they went, becoming cultural ambassadors as much as entertainers. By the close of the decade, the Jets stood on top of the world. They were young, successful, and admired, with hits echoing across radios and stages worldwide. Yet even as their fame burned brighter than ever, subtle cracks were forming. Cracks that, in time, would shake everything they had built. By the early 1990s, the cracks that had once been faint began to split wide open. As music trends shifted and their chart dominance faded, the Jets faced the heavy cost of internal divisions and external pressures. What had started as a dream powered by faith and family was now burdened by lawsuits, resentment, and the painful reality that success had not guaranteed unity. Because disputes over leadership and direction grew more intense, the siblings eventually took their fight to court in a bitter lawsuit over the band's name. This legal battle formalized the divisions that had been simmering for years, splitting a family that once sang in perfect harmony. Although the eventual settlement brought a degree of civility, the scars from the conflict remained, showing just how deeply business had intruded into family life. Yet, even amid these struggles, the Jets' story did not simply fade into silence. Instead, it evolved. Today, two active groups keep the music alive. The Jets, featuring Elizabeth, Eddie, Kathy, Moana, and Natalie, and the Jets' original family, Band, led by Heine, Leroy, and Rudy. Because both camps continue to perform, audiences still hear the songs that once defined the soundtrack of the late 80s, even if the performers now appear on separate stages. Their influence, however, stretches far beyond their own tours. Younger artists picked up their torch, with Britney Spears covering You Got It All and Aaron Carter reviving Crush on You for a new generation. Meanwhile, DJs and producers like Alan Brax, Fred Falk, and Nero sampled their hits, weaving the Jets' melodies into the fabric of modern music. These echoes confirmed that their sound still carried weight long after their commercial peak. Recognition also came through retrospectives. TV One's Unsung dedicated an episode to their story in 2019, peeling back the layers of fame and family turmoil. And in 2021, Rudy Wolfgramm produced The Jets, Making It Real, a documentary that offered yet another window into their journey. Each retelling reminded the world that behind the glittering charts was a family who had sacrificed much for their dream. Tragedy struck once more with the passing of Eugene Wolfgramm in April 2024, a somber reminder of both the passage of time and the cost of the journey. Yet even in grief, the legacy of the Jets endures. As Polynesian American trailblazers, they broke barriers and proved that family, faith, and talent could propel a group from humble beginnings into global stardom. And while their story is marked by conflict and loss, it is equally defined by resilience. The Jets may never fully return to the unity of their early years, but their music and their legacy continues to beat, echoing across generations.